Welcome to the Aviation Insurance Podcast, the podcast that helps aircraft owners and aviation businesses learn and understand the complex world of aviation insurance and risk management. From the basic principles of aviation insurance to risk management techniques and updates on the aviation insurance market, the Aviation Insurance Podcast is your guide to traverse the world of aviation insurance. Now, here's your host, Tim Bonnell.
Well, welcome to the Aviation Insurance Podcast, where we talk about the fundamentals of aviation insurance. And we are in part 2 of a short series about aviation insurance considerations when traveling to foreign countries. We're taking our aircraft out of the United States. If you haven't listened to part 1, I'd encourage you to hit pause on this and go back to part 1, where we talked about some of the fundamental issues that we need to consider, the foundational issues that need to be in place. And today we'll talk a little bit about some other specific items that we need to think about depending on the country we are traveling to. See, there are certain countries and regions that have specific insurance requirements for aircraft operating in or over their airspace. That list includes the European Union, Mexico, Hong Kong, Germany, and Greenland. And for commercial operations, there may be others like Canada. But for the sake of this conversation, we'll be focusing on the EU and Mexico, as that's some of the ones we see most often. But EU, the European Union, Hong Kong, Mexico, Germany, Greenland, and commercially, and even in Canada. So the EU, the European Union, some time ago, the European Union passed a regulation that all aircraft operations, both private and commercial, would require a certain insurance requirements in order to do so. These requirements were based on the takeoff mass of the aircraft, largely. Obviously, the size and passenger load come into play, but basically based on that weight and that information, there is a minimum limit of liability that must be carried as defined in SDR, special drawing rights, as defined by the International Monetary Fund. So anytime you have this travel, again, using a company who specializes in helping general aviation international travel operations, would be helpful to engage to stay on top of this. But there's generally websites you can find that can help you calculate this with the mass, the maximum takeoff mass or weight of the aircraft. But these SDRs have to be converted into your denomination to get the correct limit of liability. So special drawing rights is a minimum limit based on that mass. Then typically they're going to require that war risk, hull, and liability and other coverages. So if you're going in or over the European Union countries, make sure that your limits of liability are adequate based on their requirements of SDRs while flying in or over their country, I should say. Again, we've already talked about in part 1 that the territory has to include these countries as well, the policy territory of the insurance policy for that applicable aircraft, or this won't matter anyway. One of those other interesting requirements is Mexico. Being in the United States, a lot of aircraft fly down to Mexico. And if your policy territory includes Mexico, your aircraft insurance policy will respond to claims in Mexico. That said, the Mexican government has a requirement that you carry an insurance policy from a Mexican insurance company. So that's why we have Mexican liability insurance that is typically purchased either directly through the aircraft insurance company or through a third party carrier on a separate policy. Mexican government requires that this policy be the original policy, meaning it has to be printed in color, and again be on the paper of a Mexican insurance company. So while your policy will automatically respond there, in order to get in and out of the country, you're going to want to make sure you have a Mexican liability insurance policy. Again, all of these issues we talked about in part 1 of the international travel exposure still apply, but these are some specific requirements in specific countries and regions that have specific requirements as it relates to insurance if you're planning to travel there. So again, be sure to be aware of not only your policy requirements, but the requirements of those companies so that you're complying with local laws, local requirements to the places you're traveling to, in or over, to make sure that you're in full compliance with all of those issues, as being out of compliance could lead to a number of significant consequences. Well, we'll have one more part in this series on international travel. So join us again then as we continue navigating these waypoints of aviation insurance. Until then, enjoy clear skies and unlimited visibility.
Thanks for listening to the Aviation Insurance Podcast. If you found this episode of value, please share it with someone who would benefit from this information. Don't forget to subscribe in your podcast player so you don't miss any new episodes, and to help our show have more impact. This episode is brought to you by Aeris Insurance Solutions, your flight plan for navigating the turbulence of aviation insurance. For more information, visit aerisinsurance.com. That is www.aerisinsurance.com. Disclaimer: these episodes are for educational purposes only, and due to the changing regulatory and legal nature of the business, some information may change over time. Having a well-educated and experienced aviation insurance broker on your team is an absolute requirement to success in business and for managing your aircraft and aviation business risks.